This video is about literal equations. A literal equation is an equation with two or more different variables. Some literal equations are also called formulas, as we'll see. Now we'll start with this first literal equation, 4x minus 17y equals 19/7. It's a literal equation because there are two different variables, x and y. The second literal equation is also a formula. It's the formula for finding the volume of a sphere. And we can see that there are two variables, v and r. Remember that pi is not a variable. Pi is a number. It stands for 3.14159, but we consider it a number, not a variable. In this third formula, a equals pi r squared, there are two variables, a and r, so it is a literal equation. And finally, the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle, P, equals 2 times L plus W. Those are also an example of a literal equation and a formula. Now we're going to look at the process of solving for a variable. Sometimes when we write a literal equation in one way, we want to use it in a way that would make it convenient for us to want to solve for a variable. So we're going to show how to do that with a literal equation, and then we'll do it with some common formulas. So we'll start here. 4x plus 3y equals 12, and we're asked to solve for y. So that means on this side of the equation, y stays and everything else goes. So we'll start our first step by subtracting 4x from each side. And that'll take this whole 4x and move it over to the other side. If we do that, we get 3y equals negative 4x plus 12. The next thing to do is to think about dividing by 3 to get rid of that 3. And if we divide each side by 3, you notice that when we do that, when we divide by 3, we've got to divide each term by 3 on this side. Okay, so as we do that, we get to y equals negative 4/3 x plus 4. And this is the solution. We have now solved this literal equation for y. Now let's look at a couple of other examples. Now here are two more problems. First, we're asked to take a equals pi r squared and isolate r. And we might want to do this if we have a number of circles whose area we know, but we want to find out what the radius is. So if we only have to do it once, it doesn't really pay to solve the equation. But if we have to do it many times, we might want to solve the equation for r so that we can plug in a and get r directly. So here's what we'll do. Now the first step will be to divide each side of the equation by pi. When we do that, on the right-hand side, we can divide pi by pi, getting 1, and that will give us a over pi equals r squared. Now in order to undo the r squared, the inverse operation would be finding the square root. So that's what we'll do. We'll take the square root of each side. The equation is now square root of a over pi equals r. In the next example, we're asked to solve the formula for perimeter, P equals 2 times L plus W, for L in terms of P and W. And this is yet another way of asking us to solve for a variable. Again, we want to find L in terms of P and W. And what that means is that we want to isolate L. All right, so this one can be done as follows. First, you want to expand the parentheses so that we have P equals 2L plus 2W. Next, we'll subtract 2W from each side, and we'll get P equals P minus 2W equals 2L. And then divide each side by 2. And again, we remember to divide the entire left-hand side by 2, not just part of it. And this is the final formula. After we cancel the 2's, we get P minus 2W equals L. Another way of writing this, P minus 2W equals L, is to distribute the 2. And we could also write this as P over 2 minus, well, 2W over 2 is just w, so that we can write this as p over 2 minus w. So either this way or this way is a way of writing that solution. Okay, in this example we're going to solve the formula for the area of a triangle, 1/2 BH, for the variable b. And here's how that works. The first step is going to be to clear that 1/2. So we'll multiply both sides of the formula by 2, or 2 over 1. Okay, and that'll clear the fraction. So 2 over 1 times 1/2 BH equals 2a. And 2 and 2 over 1 are pretty much the same thing. And these two will cancel each other. Okay? So on the left we have b times h equals 2a. And the next thing that we're going to do if we're looking to isolate the variable b is to divide by h. So here's what that looks like. We're going to divide each side of the equation by h, and in this case the h's will cancel on the left hand side, and we'll be left with b equals 2a over h, and that's exactly what we were looking for. Now let's look at y equals mx plus b. We're going to solve that for m. So the first step might be to subtract b from each side. So subtract b from each side, because again what we're trying to do is isolate m. We'll just keep that in mind. Okay, so we subtract b from each side and we get y minus b equals m times x. And the next thing we're going to want to do is divide both sides by x. So we'll do that. We'll divide both sides by x. And now we have y minus b over x equals m. And that's a great way of stating the answer. I'd like you to try each one of these problems. First one is 5x minus 7y equals 42. And I'd like you to solve this equation for x in terms of y. And then on the right, the problem v equals pi r squared h, I would like you to solve that equation for h in terms of v and r. Stop the video, copy these problems into your journal along with the solutions, and when you're done with the solutions you can check them by looking at the video. Alright, let's take a look at the solution for 5x minus 7y equals 42. The first thing we're going to want to do, well, we want to solve for x, so that's what we want to stay there. So we'll take that 7y and add it to both sides, and we'll get 5x equals 7y plus 42. Next, we'll divide each side of the equation by 5, and notice that I'm dividing both terms by 5. And then we can see that the solution here is x equals 7/5 y plus 42/5. Another way of writing this solution might be, and another way that you could have done it would to write this as 7y plus 42 over 5 equals x. For now, either one of them is acceptable, but I'd like you to learn how to do it both ways. Now for the second problem, v equals pi r squared h. We're solving for h, so we're going to be aware that we're keeping h on that side. And here's what the solution looks like. We're going to divide each side by pi r squared, and we can just do that whole thing at the same time, pi r squared. And on the left-hand side, we have v over pi r squared. And on the right-hand side, you can see that the pi's cancel, the r squareds cancel, and we're left just with h. So the solution there is v over pi r squared equals h.